Welcome, welcome, welcome. What a show we have prepared for you. Because you're probably watching this on some video feed, you know that Giles is wearing his Sunday best. We have a very prestigious guest joining Giles and myself today. We have Dan Misener, co-founder of Bumper, here to put the world to rights around all things measurement. We are here at the Media Roundtable. And of course, that is where we explore the business of trust in the new media economy. I'm your host, Dan Granger. I'm the CEO of Oxford Road. And last week, we dropped on you the news that we had formed a task force. It had been operating in the shadows for nearly a year. We call it AMP because we wanted to be super on the nose and make sure it had an audio flair to it. But AMP stands for the Alliance for Measurement in Podcasting. And this is a group of industry Avengers who have come together to try to figure out what is a podcast and how do you measure an impression and how do you measure ad performance, which if you're just a listener, you don't care at all about these things. But if you work in this business, it does matter. So we set out to solve this because and it's really not even something any of us can solve ourselves. This is like truly, it's either going to happen through a collection of key stakeholders around the industry all rallying behind one standard thing. But, we at least wanted to provide a framework for that. And while we've been doing this work, there are other great leaders in the industry in our little podcast community who have been also working in parallel on their own initiatives to try to get at some of these same issues. Dan Misener is one of those people through his leadership and the work that Bumper is doing. So we're going to talk about something that is newly released by Bumper, which is the Bumper score that just came out and all of the great work that we're doing. So we're going to get into all that today. We're going to unpack, why is this actually something that matters so much that we take all this time to talk about it? Why are solutions needed and what solutions are possible today, as well as where we're trying to go with all this. So welcome, Dan, to the Media Roundtable. We're really glad to have you here.
Very glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And welcome, Giles. Thank you for joining. Yes.
Corporate attire is not what it used to be, sadly.
That's
I'm
right.
going for Jedi, podcast Jedi.
I like it. Very handsome. And I see you're in the casita today.
Yeah, I like to mix
it. The
it.
fireplace is burning. So
I just didn't want a background with Riverside branding. Like, call me a rampant anti-consumerist, but I couldn't hack it. So I've gone for a plainer background.
Well done. Well done. Always the minimalist. Okay. So Dan, let's get into you. First of all, what is Bumper?
Bumper's a podcast data and growth company. And for the first 4 years of our existence, we have almost exclusively served publishers, enterprise podcasters who make shows. Some of those are ad supported. Some of those are from nonprofits. Some of those are from big brands. And the thing that people get in touch with us about is audience growth. Nobody I've ever met is happy with the size of their audience. Nobody has said, Dan, we have enough viewers, we have enough listeners, we can stop now. And so we've spent many, many years focused on sort of audience growth, podcast marketing, audience development work. And as part of that, we have necessarily become deeply familiar with and expert in podcast measurement. Because if you purport to help people grow their shows and actually grow their shows as measured in real people, actual playback, and time spent, you got to be able to prove that what you're recommending actually works. And so alongside the audience growth work, we've become really, really focused on podcast data, measuring success. And I think this is where Bumper's work and Oxford Road's work and the task force's work really intersects, is trying to figure out what are the right yardsticks for where we are and where we're going, and how do we move beyond arguably very broken yardsticks that got us this far, but aren't likely to move us deep into the future.
Or as some have called it, a mixed bag of hot, steaming streams of garbage all kind of flowing together, right? Was that the quote?
I believe on a recent Media Roundtable episode, you referred to CPMs being based on, a mixed bag of garbage.
Yeah, exactly. So what, why does that matter? Like this Media Roundtable, we could be downloaded on millions of devices right now.
Yeah.
And who cares? Why rock the boat? Why bother with trying to figure out if an actual human being was there? Aren't you looking for trouble?
I think there are some who would argue everything's fine, nothing to see here,
Nothing
no
to see
problem.
here.
Please keep signing the IOs. Please keep sending us the checks. And if that's working for you, great. If you've got a performance marketing firm, or you've got a great show and network that mostly deals with performance marketers, and you've got a certain number of dollars that flow in, and you've got an impact on customer acquisition costs coming out the other end, if that's working for you, great. But I think it's not hard to find examples of how the business has changed so much just in the last handful of years, and some of the measures that we've historically used don't feel particularly stable. I mean, I can point to iOS 17 and how one major podcast listening app really changed and impacted a lot of people's businesses. We could point to Spotify and how their encouragement to publishers to start publishing video has cut the download out of the loop and caused a lot of teams to wonder, where did my sellable impressions go? Or we look at, industry organizations or, efforts like the IAB's work on podcast measurement, and how every couple of years, the definition of a download gets ever tighter and more exclusive, right? So I just named three things. You could also talk about YouTube and the rise of sort of video podcasts. There's a zillion different factors. But I think if all that's working for you and you're feeling good about the future, great, let's keep going. At Bumper, we're pretty certain that the yardsticks that we used for the first 20 years of podcasting are not the yardsticks that we should be using going forward.
So I do want to get into some of the technical reasons why the yardsticks are different and why this is such an issue. But the thing that truly people, besides the pay no attention to the man behind the curtain stuff, like I think a lot of people genuinely want to know, like, why is this really worth even taking on? What is the real harm or the real impact? Is it, in your view, is it a problem that people have today? They just don't know that they have it. Are they feeling pain and just have we all learned to live with it and it's just part of us now? Or is it really, are we driving toward a cliff that we don't see? Is it all of these things? Like, why does this matter?
I think yes is the answer to all of those questions.
Okay.
And I think for some, the ground is crumbling. For others, this is about future-proofing and de-risking their existing businesses. Why does this matter? Because there is a gigantic gap between what buyers are paying for and what sellers are actually delivering. We talk and think a lot about the distinction between ads that are served, episodes that are served, versus ads that are played back, episodes that are actually played back. And this all started for Bumper a little while ago when we started looking at the data that we have available to us through our technology solution, which we call the Bumper Dashboard. We've been pulling in ad delivery data and episode delivery data from the places that know about those things. Ad servers know about how many ads were served, how many ads were technically delivered to a device. Hosting providers know about episode delivery. They know about the delivery of downloaded files to a device. But the ad servers and the hosting providers don't know anything about the actual playback of the files that land on somebody's device. And so why does this matter? Every single time I get in a room with anybody in our industry, I ask, show of hands, who's got a phone full of MP3 files that they're likely never going to listen to? And a large number of hands go up, particularly those who are using a traditional RSS-based podcast app like Apple Podcasts that auto downloads every single episode of the shows that they're following. I follow 8 different daily shows. I don't listen to 8 different daily shows every single day, but the files land on my device. So I ask people, show of hands, who's got MP3 files on their phone that they're never going to hit play on? Hands go up. I ask people, who in the room has started an episode but not made it all the way through? And more hands go up. And then I ask, who in the room has skipped an ad? They've hit the fast forward button 15 seconds a few times, and a few more hands go up. And by the end of it, everybody's hand is up, right? And so that delta between episodes that are delivered, technically delivered, which our industry is very good at counting right now. I think we have wonderful technologies and great companies that are very good at counting the number of episodes delivered or ads delivered or ad impressions delivered. The delta between that number and what actually demonstrably gets played back is large, and it is not uniform across shows. And so what does this mean? There are bad actors. There are people involved in arbitrage schemes. There are people involved in pay-per-download schemes that are devaluing high quality shows. And if I was a high quality show with a real audience, I'd be quite upset about that. And there are shows that are punching way above their weight, delivering huge value. And I think at Oxford Road, you've seen this and built a very successful business on the back of identifying who's undervalued and how we can get, access to the audiences of these shows where there is a meaningful transaction happening. And so, for a variety of reasons, I think this matters because the delta is large and it's very different show to show, network to network, sometimes even episode to episode.
So, and Giles, I welcome you to jump in on this too, but just peeling back the layers on the pain that's happening today and not even worrying about what's over the horizon yet. It feels like if I'm on the sell side, if I'm a publisher or a creator, the current system that does not delineate between an actual person consuming an ad or a piece of content versus a file that is delivered that is not consumed by a person. The reason that matters to me is because if I actually care about having a quality audience and I'm actually in the business of reaching people, I'm getting unfairly priced and benchmarked against people that are doing this fraudulently, or whether or not they know it. Maybe they don't even know it because they're just paying somebody to promote it, or they're using a system that they don't realize is not giving them quality audience, but it's not real audience. And so if I'm a good actor in that, I don't like that I'm being held back and comped with a bad actor because I am making a quality product. The people that this seems to serve, I feel like there's a crypto metaphor in here somewhere, but the people that this is benefiting the most are the ones that are kind of operating maybe in a less on way in the way that they get audiences from the sell side. Is that really the today problem?
I mean, that's one of the problems, and I think, Dan M., you're well placed to comment on that. And so maybe I'll kick it to you on that in a second. I mean, from my perspective, it also strikes me that on the publishing side, particularly, especially as your show gets larger and larger, with podcasting these days, knowing the actual number of people who are listening to your show is a very empowering thing. Right? Like so much these days, like so much of the podcasting business, for example, is going into the events business. I think we've talked about this, Dan M. Like if you think you've got 1 million listeners and you go and book a 50,000 seater venue for your for your 20
Yeah.
nights of the show, and only 5,000 people show up each night, that's a major financial consequence for you and a very poor business decision. And similarly, if you're looking at sort of co-guesting or co-hosting, or exchanging, appearances on each other's shows, like, you're making those types of decisions based on flawed information. And so it's not just about sort of issues around, people juicing downloads or, unfair playing fields, which is a very legitimate issue. And I'm going to pass it to Dan to talk about that in a sec. But just, it's also just generally the sort of the need of the industry, which sort of feels inevitable, in media and maybe in all industries, to get better and better data, more data that more and more reliably reflects what's actually going on in reality. That feels like an inevitable trend. It feels like the MLK, like the arc of history bends towards justice, like
Right.
the arc of data bends towards accuracy, something like that, right? And there's no getting
Except
away.
in attribution, but yes.
There's I'm not going to comment on that, but it just feels like an inevitability, and I think that's an also important part of the point here. Like, people can resist, but ultimately, it feels like it's going to be a tough resistance to hold on to for too long. Dan, anything that you would like to add, particularly on that initial side?
I love your example of the live event business, but I'm thinking about any other downstream or adjacent business that is connected to a podcast. You talk about the importance of right sizing the denominator to fill butts in seats at a live venue. I want my denominator to be people, right? But that is also true for, I've got a book, I've got a speaking tour, I've got merchandise, I have subscription gated content. We've worked with teams who offer, through many of the different vendors, pay to listen podcasts. Put in your credit card information and you get bonus, or you get early access, or you get any number of benefits. And historically, they'd been looking at the download figure as their denominator. And they wondered, why are our conversion rates so poor? Why are so few of the people who listen to us for free ponying up for our premium package or for our pay to listen option? When the denominator becomes people, the conversion rates look so much better and so much truer to the reality of the power of the medium. So I think that is a huge piece of this. But beyond the conversion data or the attribution data, I'm also just thinking about trust, right? And I think about the dollars that could be spent in podcasting that are not currently being spent in podcasting, that should be spent in podcasting, where trust in the data is the barrier. And I've heard anecdotally from some very significant media buyers, some of them at the big holdcos, saying, yeah, there's a will, there's an appetite. We want to buy in podcasting. We have an understanding that it works, but when we buy, the data that comes back to us is not confidence inspiring. It doesn't plug into our existing systems. Our planners have a really difficult time with it. And so I think better data unlocks, I think, more revenue, but it unlocks more revenue because it first creates a layer of trust that I don't think we have a strong position on right now as an industry.
So before we get more into the buy side, just on the sell side, what I'm hearing you both say is basically you're building a house of straw when you are building on a foundation where the denominator is not based on actual people consumption. And, it's interesting. One of the things I've learned from talking to creators that have reached some scale is, a lot of them will play different distribution platforms like an instrument, and they're all different instruments, right? But what that means is they're spending an exorbitant amount of time optimizing towards something that in many cases it seems like isn't even a real marker, but it's an arbitrary marker, and they're playing the algorithm Olympics to get more bots to make it appear a certain way, which is great for short-termism, but if you're really trying to build a business around this thing, it's going to come to get you at some point.
One of the most helpful tools that I have in my toolkit is a distinction that the writer Casey Newton makes between traffic and audience. Casey says anybody can get traffic. You can buy traffic, you can steal traffic, you can trick people into generating traffic. Audience, on the other hand, really hard and so much more valuable. And I think really the shift that we're talking about here, whether we're talking about delivery metrics versus consumption metrics or ad served versus ad played, I think the broader transition we're talking about is a move from measuring traffic to measuring or verifying audience, which is why when Bumper talks about the work that we do, a lot of it is framed as audience verification work. We are proving that there are people there because we're in the audience business. Most of our clients are in the audience business. And I don't want to presume, but I'm pretty sure that Oxford Road is in the audience business, not in the traffic for traffic's sakes business.
What is your favorite podcast other than the Media Roundtable? Is it Joe Rogan, Call Her Daddy, Mel Robbins, Crime Junkie, Amy Poehler, Smartless, Pivot? What are you into? It's such an interesting dinner table topic to ask people. You learn a lot, and people are so passionate about this medium. They're so passionate about it. And where do you listen? Where do you watch? Is it YouTube? Is it Apple? Is it Spotify? You are in the center of what we do as an organization. That is our business. We are Oxford Road, and we help some of the leading brands in the world be successful advertising in these channels. We're the largest specialist that exists. We buy the most ads in this channel. So we are actually powering this industry. We buy over $500 million of ads per year for wonderful brands like Shopify, Wayfair, DraftKings, Masterclass, Chime, Quince, AG1, Mint Mobile. We're interrupting all your favorite podcasts, including not just the usual suspects, but there are thousands in the long tail that are great niche shows with really loyal audiences. And what happens is when you advertise there, the host really only gets to pick one in your category. And so if you're the first there, you can kind of lock up that relationship, that annuity, and be recommended to those audiences for years. So it's a powerful space. And it's one where we have the privilege of leading right now. We've got lots of great ways to de-risk our clients' campaigns, like our Orbit data set that's getting close to $2 billion of performance data. So we know what's going to work in advance. We also have Audiolytics, which are our proprietary ad grading system to make sure every word counts and is always getting optimized, and then de-risked through our brand safety taxonomy as well to make sure we watch out for your brand values. If you want to win in this channel, and you've got something to say, you got a product worth talking about, and you want to get into this trust economy, and you're serious about it, you really want to be a part of it over the long haul, we'd love to talk to you. OxfordRoad.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you like free stuff. It's called The Influencer, and it's free. We also have a lot of good thought pieces if you want to learn at OxfordRoad.com. That is OxfordRoad.com. Right. Well, and I think so. If we're talking buy side, we were talking earlier. It's pretty self-evident that if you're buying, you can't convert, the files. You have to convert people into customers, right? And so in a way, I think because the industry has been built on a foundation of performance marketers, we've been able to kind of overcome that. Yeah. Where we've never really put a lot of stock in the download because inevitably it's the performance data. That's why we make such a big deal out of our Orbit tool. It gives us relativity on performance, which is kind of its own rating system, and lets it not matter as much for the rest. But I will say, even as a performance marketer, you're still doing that first buy on a CPM. And if that CPM is built on a faulty foundation, you're burning your hand more than you should need to. And then when you want to move up market, because what does every mature media platform want to do? It wants to kick out the direct response advertisers that built it and diversify away into larger brands. It needs that so that it can continue to scale into the billions and billions and tens of billions. But the big brands, as you're identifying, are having a really lousy user experience as they're coming in because it doesn't match the other channels. And so when they don't have trust, and I totally agree with you, all of this stuff ladders to trust. We're leaving a lot of money on the table. And so, I guess one thing I'd love both of you to comment on is, are we in a place that is very unique? I mean, I've run a little bit of research on the movement of opportunity to exposure to actual exposure in paid media in the US. It's something like 20 years ago, it was like 75% opportunity for exposure. Now it's like 75% actual exposure because digital media generally allows that. So there is this, as Giles talks about, the arc of history. But is it unique that we not only have the opportunity for versus actual exposure problem, but that it is coming through, there's not even a single signal on that. There's also a multitude of signals. Is that unique for us? Are we in rarefied air here in terms of our dysfunction?
Do you want to go, Dan, or shall I?
I feel really comforted by the current dysfunction because the current dysfunction in podcasting and podcast measurement rhymes with the dysfunction we saw in display advertising online 15 years ago.
That's what we've always aspired to be, is display advertising.
When we started doing audience verification at work at Bumper, I read as much as I could about the history of banner ads and early web ads, early online display advertising. And there was a moment, 2010, 2011, 2012, when I think a lot of brands and the agencies representing them started asking very good, very smart questions about what they were actually buying and what they were getting in return for the checks that they sent. And I think the discoveries at the time were, we're paying for ads that never appear on screen. Technically, they were loaded because a file was requested and a file was delivered, but the ad was hidden behind 8 layers of other ads, or it was never scrolled into view, or it was a 1x1 pixel, but the actual image was a whole lot larger. There was a whole shift in online display advertising with so-called viewability metrics. And I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but I think in podcasting, we're living through a similar moment. And the kind of rigor that we saw advertisers, brands, and the agencies that represent them, the kinds of questions they were asking of display advertising, I'm hearing more and more about podcasting. What are we actually buying? How many people did we get access to? And so is this unique? It feels pretty familiar to anybody who knows that story.
So the multi-method isn't necessarily a unique problem, in addition to the exposure versus theoretical
Well, there's some nuance here, though. I mean, I would add, like, especially starting my early career in the UK, your traditional media channels, at least, like, they're thought about and traded in terms of opportunities to see and opportunities to hear. And Dan G, we've talked about this, right? So in America, we talk about them as impressions, but actually, I think in the UK, people are just a little bit more, I don't want to say humble, but they're not assuming that their ads are being consumed by everybody. You may be driving past a billboard and not paying attention to it, or you may be making...
So this is an American problem that we want this stuff. I want it now, on demand. Bigger.
Give me my impression.
Bigger impression.
Now, obviously, it's true in the United States as well. Like, the fact that you're serving a TV impression does not mean that somebody is sitting there watching that impression, right? So in a sense, it is true that all ad impressions are opportunities to see. However, what makes podcasting particularly sort of frustrating and backward is like, let's at least get the content running. Like, let's just get it up there, like on the screen or on the player, and then it's on par with all the other channels and all the other ads that have an opportunity to see. I mean, technically, there is an opportunity to hear a podcast ad if it's been downloaded, but it's not apples to apples with the other opportunities to see. It's still like another layer back. So it's like an
It's
opportunity to have
compounded,
an
right?
opportunity to
Yeah.
hear. And so, yeah, I mean, it is an old problem, but podcasting still lives in a sort of backwater, you know, at the back of the problem. Maybe backwater is not the optimal word. I've said it on mic now. So let's move on.
So, so it's not just that we're dysfunctional; it's that we're exponentially dysfunctional. But I guess, Dan, thank you for reading the history of display advertising, so we don't have to. Can you bring us to the punchline where people, I imagine, said we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore, right? Like, what was the inflection point that got the marketplace to change and get organized, and everybody that was profiting from the ambiguity said, we're just going to have to deal with this? You know, how does it happen?
It did not happen overnight, nor do I think the move from delivery-based transactions in podcasting to consumption-based transaction in podcasting is going to happen overnight. It was multiple years, lots of different companies, super messy, and eventually the companies that won got swallowed up by the big ad tech companies who we don't need to say the names of. But it's now the norm, right? If I go buy display advertising, I'm not buying anything that doesn't have viewability metrics baked in sort of at the platform level, so that I've got a high degree of confidence that when I buy an ad, it will be played back. And I think it's important to be really careful with our words, right? We talk about ad delivered versus ad seen or ad heard. I don't think anybody's doing a great job of proving, was a person in the room, were their eyeballs on the screen, was their attention fully focused. I'll settle for ad delivered and ad played back, because we can actually measure whether the ad was played back, whether the episode was played back, whether someone was paying attention or not. I mean, that's a question maybe for another day, but that delta between ad served, ad delivered, and ad actually played back, that's knowable today in 2026.
Well, and so how bad is it, this delta of denominators between the blended versions that are in market today versus the actuals? And like, I know you talk about this a lot, but I don't know how much you're actually able to disclose. But set the stage for us here.
For some, the delta is not very big at all. And for others, it is ruinously bad. Career ending, business ending, bad. And everything in between. So episodes that get downloaded but not played, that's a big factor here. Episodes where people start but don't make it to the ad break, that's another factor. And then actual ad avoidance, skipping through, a third factor. And so the shows that don't have a really big problem with this are shows that aren't generating a whole lot of auto downloads, right? So if you've got a relatively new show and most of your audience is on Spotify video or YouTube, you don't have the same impression inflation problem that a decade-old show with a very large exposure to Apple Podcasts auto downloads has. If you've got great episodes that people hit play on and stick all or most of the way through, you don't have the retention challenge that somebody who's buying views each 10 seconds long where nobody ever makes it to the ad break has, right? And so on the whole, there's a significant gap between episode delivered and episode played back. But on an individual show basis, the delta has a lot to do with time in market, depth of back catalog, exposure to auto downloads, and frankly, quality of shows and quality of ad creative, right? And the best shows have real audiences. that hit play, spend time with the episode, and don't actively avoid the ads. And the worst performing shows with the biggest deltas, the biggest gaps, are shows that went and bought a whole lot of downloads that probably don't have real people behind them. And the shows aren't that good. And the ad creative kind of sucks. Right.
So Dan, is the problem that we're dealing with here, is it malicious intent by most, or not malicious maybe, but are people trying to operate this way? Why is this such a problem? Or is it a byproduct of just everybody kind of growing up, doing things their own way? Like, how do we get here?
I think there are bad actors, there is ignorance, and there are misaligned incentives, right? And all of those and more. I don't think it's a single thing driving the inflation that we talk about. For me, we have spent 20 years measuring using the easiest thing to measure that gives us the biggest possible number.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, better, more accurate, more trustworthy data has come along. But why does this persist? I think it's human nature. I've never met somebody who wants to trade a big number for a small number, even if the small number is better, more accurate, a better foundation to build upon for the future. And I think for a lot of shops that sell, who wants to call into question what they've been selling for the past 10 years, for the past 15 years?
Right.
So I don't think there are a whole lot of incentives to move off of the status quo. I'm just waiting for some upstart to come in and throw everybody under the bus and say, we're selling on verified impressions. We're selling on verified audience. You don't have to spend a dime on ads that nobody hears. But that's a hard thing to do if you've been in this for a while and you've got clients who are going to call you up and say, wait a minute, what have you been selling me?
Okay, so in terms of where we go from here, you've been working on one end of a solution. We've been working on another end of the solution, and with a little bit of overlap. Why don't you talk about the bumper score that at time of press will be live? What that is, what you're trying to do here.
The bumper score is a way to quantify that gap between episode delivered and episode played back. And it's a way to index that relative to average performance. So it's a score, it's a number. And what Bumper does is we get access to the ad delivery and episode delivery data sources, hosting providers, ad servers. And we also get access to playback data, first-party playback data from the major podcast playback apps, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. With that, you can calculate the delta, the gap that we've been talking about. Surprise, surprise, not every show has the same delta. And so the bumper score is a number. The lowest score is 0. The highest score is 200. The median is 100. If you get 100 on your bumper score, you are the middlest of the middle. You are doing average in terms of actually reaching real audience with your episodes. If you're more than 100, better than average. Less than 100, worse than average. So it's a way, without actually exposing the real delta between delivery and consumption, of scoring shows against one another. And I think the people who have the highest scores are reaching the greatest number of people. They've got a higher value impression count, right? They might not have more impressions, but they got better impressions because there's people on the other end. And I think anybody with a good score should be shouting about it and talking to all of their advertising partners about how they are doing better than average at actually reaching real audiences who spend time with marketing messages. So it's a score, it's a number.
And is this do you think this is a final destination that helps right this issue? Where
I
is
hope
it
this is obviated soon. I have it on good authority that there is a panacea, there is a utopia coming with the results of the AMP task force, and so I anxiously
Yes,
await that
indeed,
day.
indeed. Well, I think we're going to give you something that is a version of that, but I think another part of this has nothing to do with the technical and is purely a question of like, can we hasten the demand on a sustainable, you know, platform involved solution where they're willingly cooperating. And I think the task force is a big step toward that, I hope. But then it's like, okay, yeah, but then what? So we're going to hand over all of these recommendations, and you've got an interim. You're filling the gap on part of it, right? And then we need real buy-in, and that's where it kind of comes back to your proxies and other categories like display. Like, what's going to have to happen so that it becomes, I feel like what you're offering may be like training wheels for people to start to move in that direction if there's adoption, right?
This is built for the world we live in today, using data that is available today to help people make smarter decisions today.
Mm-hmm.
I am so hopeful that the kind of coming together of the industry and cooperation across different levels of the stack is going to happen. In the last episode of the show, I think, Giles, you talked about RAD as an effort, and that was something I paid so much attention to at the time, right? I hope AMP has different outcomes than RAD had. But the thing about what we've built with the bumper score is that it's available today, it's usable today. It is not the end state that we want to see, but call it a stepping stone, call it an intermediary measure. It's something that individual networks and shows can use to transact and to inform transactions, that actually doesn't require participation from standards bodies, doesn't require participation
Right.
from any of, nobody has to build anything new. So good enough for now, I think, is what we're
If we
trying
could get
to build.
standards bodies to support methods for this, do you think that would solve the issue?
I think would help an awful lot.
Uh-huh.
And I think there is a role for, as we've seen with the IAB's work in the past, there is a role for conveners to make those kinds of decisions.
Uh-huh.
I was part of the team that put together the IAB 2.0 guidelines for downloads those many years ago.
That was Tech Lab.
That was Tech Lab, and that was a worthwhile effort and an incredibly well used set of guidelines that are, it's been updated and used again and again and again. But the pace of that, I don't think the pace of getting that kind of consensus building happening, that's slower than I would like right now.
And with HLS being the rage suddenly, how does that fit into all this?
I think it makes things a whole lot messier. We've started to see some of the reporting that comes back to publishers and creators through the hosting provider dashboards where they've built the Apple HLS integration, or they're using the alternate enclosure tags. I think there is some future state where HLS solves everybody's problems, and the gap between ad delivered and ad played back, or episode delivered and episode played back, I think that shrinks with wider adoption of HLS. And yeah, maybe someday we will arrive at that utopia. But in the meantime, it's, I think, made things a whole lot more complicated because it's another set of measures that somehow don't fit in, what did you call it, Dan? The mixed bag of garbage. It's another ingredient in the mixed bag of garbage.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And I guess while we're on this, I want to get your take on some of the other work of AMP. If you can just comment on, these definitions, like there's a lot of resistance to defining ourselves. I mean, I just put it out on LinkedIn to get, some folks in my network's feedback on these questions. And some people, some of this is like, some people say you can't handle the truth, and some people say, why put containers on any of this?
Yeah.
All you're doing is limiting the industry. Do you think podcasting should have definition around what it even is? And if so, what do you think that definition should be?
I tend to be a big tent podcast definition person. I fall into the school of a podcast is whatever the audience calls a podcast. And I've participated in many conversations over the years about trying to put a box around podcasting.
Yeah.
And every time I've been part of those conversations, 6 months later, the popular understanding of that word and the colloquial meaning of that word has not matched up with the box that it was tried to be put in. I grew up in radio. I came up in radio, and I watched Steve Jobs get on stage whenever they announced the introduction of podcasting on the iPhone. And he said, podcasting is like TiVo for radio,
right?
Or it's like Wayne's World for radio.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge I am somebody who came up where my initial frame of reference for podcasting was radio you can put in your pocket. Mm-hmm. And I work with many people much younger than me for whom their frame of reference is talk show on YouTube with mics in the frame. And it is not my job to say that's not a podcast.
Well, and I think part of what we've learned in our AMP adventures is that, we have to disentangle what the audience requires from what the business requires. And so, if you're pricing the industry, if you're raising money on the growth of podcasting, what are you actually measuring? And I think for an audience, they don't necessarily care. And it doesn't matter that we're not, who are we to tell them what they're consuming? But, if you're buying and selling, it's harder. And if you're trying to identify the right buyer and seller, it's harder. If you don't have identity. And I think what we've kind of seen in the work, even preceding AMP on this topic, is that there is some agreement between brands and consumers and practitioners in the business, in that everybody's kind of said, well, it's now beyond the RSS. It's now audio and video. However, there is a distinguishing factor, which is this idea that it starts with the spoken word. And if you can close your eyes and it still works, you have the essence of a podcast in various formats. So anyway, we're still chasing that, and the attribution on ad performance is a very parallel topic to what we're talking about, the impressions. So just winding down here. How much possibility is there for growth in this industry if we actually engage with the reality of the situation and move toward reliable measurements of people and audience? What happens financially? Why should as an industry we come together and care about this?
I'm going to resist the urge to put a dollar figure on it, and I'm going to speak maybe in terms of the stability.
You're killing the headline for the episode.
Well, I'm talking to the team
you'd
that
say
put out
$30 billion, we'd have something here.
Exactly. You've got a $1 billion number, and I'm sure there's a rigorous methodology behind where that $1 billion figure came from.
We did a lot to rationalize that. I think that the more exciting numbers than that are, you have to go into the theoretical, and you're trying to quantify opportunity cost, which is the hard part.
Yeah. I think I have seen enough businesses without strong fundamentals come and go over the years in this industry, fluffed up, built up on inflated numbers. And I think the thing that moving from delivery to consumption brings is stability and a firm foundation to build on for the future. I see all the survey-based data along with everybody else. I see the adoption. I see what people say when they are consuming podcasts. I watch those Edison webinars along with everybody else. And I see the numbers tick up and up and up and up and up and up. That is a different curve than we have seen in impression counts over the years. And so the thing that I want for everybody with a new yardstick or additional augmenting yardsticks is more stability, more stable businesses to build on over time that are actually rooted in the stuff that doesn't change, right? Spotify, YouTube, Apple, all the other players, they're going to change the jargon. The delivery technology may change every few months, right? The definition of a download is going to change with every point revision on the IAB's guidelines. Like, there's stuff that changes and then there's stuff that doesn't change. And what tends not to change is people choosing to hit play and spend time with a show. And if we can root the success of our businesses to those fundamentals, actual people actually hitting play and spending time with us, that feels like a far more sustainable way of growing than trying to ride an arbitrage scheme to the ground.
Hear, hear. Giles, anything you want to add?
Thought that sounded like a great way to close the episode.
Hear, hear. Well, Dan, thank you for your feels selfless, but thanks for your commitment to the industry. And I do think what you are doing with the bumper score and just being vocal in the market, helping people understand the issues here. I think it strengthens this medium that we care about. This is a funny medium because you don't feel this way about CTV. You don't feel this way about Amazon Prime, right? There is something that is unique about whatever box or lack of lane lines you want to put around what a podcast is. Like, we care about it for some reason. There's an essence to it, and I think you're preserving it and trying to play the long game here and get us out of just, feeding the monkey today, which is increasingly hard to do in this world. But it's a privilege to be working on the same issue from a different angle with you, and I'm glad to know that you're out there doing this. And Jonas and the team at Bumper have been fantastic advocates for this industry. So thanks for joining us today. I would encourage everyone to check out the Bumper score. You want to get a plug in for how they might go about doing that?
Our internet website, wearebumper.com, is the best place to get
your internet
free
website.
We have an internet website, wearebumper.com, and you can there sign up for your no cost bumper score. You can hook up all the data sources and get your number.
If you dare.
If you're proud of your show.
If you're proud of your show, there you go. I like it. Okay. Well, that's the time that we have for the Media Roundtable. Thanks for joining us. Of course, this show is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we really want you to use this canvas to grow your business, but also to do a little bit of good in the world, which you do when you support quality programming in this business of trust that we've been talking about. If you want to learn more about us, go to oxfordroad.com, subscribe to our weekly newsletter, which is called The Influencer, comes out every week. It is free to you, and it's really designed to help marketers that want to engage in this space more successfully. We love feedback, info@mediaroundtable.com. Don't forget about Ad Infinitum, our sister program, hosted by Stu Redwine on the creative side of this business. And until next time, influence responsibly.